Leonidas Radcliff Burgoyne Sr. was born in Cecil County, Maryland, the son of Caleb Karen Burgoyne Jr. and Elizabeth Adeline Lilly. His grandfather was Caleb Karen Burgoyne Sr. and Rebecca Cantley. His grandfather was a veteran of the War of 1812, having served in Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Ward Vea's 49th Regiment of Maryland Militia as a sergeant. Leonidas would lose his father when he was 4 years old, leaving his mother a widow with 3 young children. His childhood and early adult years were unremarkable, however the Civil War offered him an opportunity to expand his horizon. He enlisted in the U.S. Navy on April 19, 1864, and became an engineer aboard the USS Jasmine. The Jasmine was a wooden-hulled tugboat that was assigned to the West Gulf Blockading Squadron in 1863. Leonidas would join her in 1864, where she served as a supply boat, as well as a dispatch vessel, delivering communications between the ships of the squadron. When the war was over, Leonidas found himself in Pensacola, Florida, in a peacetime navy. While in Pensacola, he met Elzada Olivia Lawrence, the daughter of Silas Veronese Lawrence and Nancy Litchfield. He was discharged from the Navy on March 25, 1866, but remained long enough to marry Elzada on December 3 at the Pensacola Navy Yard before shipping out. Upon returning home to Newcastle, Delaware, he and Elzada had another matrimonial ceremony, perhaps for the sole benefit of the family. He would re-enlist in the Navy on December 19, 1866, and was stationed aboard the USS Huron as an assistant engineer. His was mustered out of the Navy on August 22, 1869. Luckily, he missed the fateful voyage of the Huron on November 23, 1877, when she entered a huge storm and ran aground off Nag's Head on the 24th. Only 200 yards off the beach, the heavy surf together with the strong currents and cold water kept the crew from swimming to shore. Most of the crew were washed overboard by the gigantic waves that drowned 98 of the men. As a civilian, Leonidas employed his engineering skills and by 1870 was building engines in Wilmington, Delaware. But by 1880, he and Elzada and their children had moved back to the Pensacola Navy Yard, where he went to work as a machinist. In 1882, the family moved back to the city. Here, the 1885 city directory has him involved in a variety of jobs to include a grocer, machinist, and engineer at Garden and 11th Avenue. But things came to an abrupt end when he passed away on November 24, 1885. It is believed he was buried in the St. John's Cemetery, where Elzada would later join him. In the meantime, she applied for and was granted his Civil War pension on September 25, 1888 of $24 per month, which would end if she ever remarried. As for Elzada, she remained in Pensacola and remarried on October 2, 1889. Her new husband was Jacob Albert Blackwell Wilson. One child was born to this union, Lawrence Alonzo Wilson, Sr. Elzada and Jacob would part ways in 1900 as she devoted the rest of her life to her children and grandchildren. She would pass away on April 19, 1919. Leonidas Radcliff Burgoyne Jr. was born in Wilmington, Delaware, and would marry Nancy Catherine Brown in 1888. He would follow in his father's footsteps as a machinist for most of his life. He passed away in 1929 and was buried in St. John's Cemetery. Their next child was Louis A. Burgoyne, born in Pensacola in 1867, but there is no other information available as to his fate or whereabouts past 1880. Silas Arthur Burgoyne was born in Pensacola and returned here with his parents. By 1900, he had become a jeweler in Mississippi and married Mary Theodora Raimundo. By 1910, he had become president and manager of the S. A. Burgoyne Jewelry Company in Mobile, Alabama. He would pass away in 1921 and buried in the Pine Crest Cemetery. Prior to his jewelry venture, Silas teamed up with his brother, Caleb, in a gymnast act in the 1890s. George Washington Burgoyne was born in Pensacola, but by 1900 he had relocated to Chicago, Illinois. There, he became a court reporter, where he remained until his death in 1933. He would marry Minnie Roth, his second wife, in 1895. His first wife was Ernestine Redfield Burgoyne, who was born in 1874 in Germany. She died in 1907 at Pensacola, Florida, and was buried in the Temple Bethel Cemetery. They were married on August 3, 1890, with one child resulting, Miriam Alexander Mary Burgoyne. George died on December 15, 1933 in Chicago, Illinois, and was buried at St. Michael's Cemetery in Pensacola. She married her second husband Andrew Noonan Dobbs in 1907 in New Orleans. On September 13, 1907, she was found shot to death. Caleb Reese Moody Burgoyne was born in Powellton, Florida, and would marry Christian Irma Largue in 1899. He spent most of this life in the timber business before becoming the secretary and manager of the Stearns Lumber and Export Company. He would pass away in 1929 and was buried in St. John's Cemetery and joined by his wife the following year. Clara Elzada Burgoyne was born in Pensacola and would marry Emmanuel Rivers in 1893. Throughout their marriage, John would work for the most part as a railroad switchman, with a brief period in 1900 as a stevedore. Clara would pass away in 1944 and was joined by Emmanuel in St. Michael's Cemetery in 1952. Ida Elizabeth Burgoyne would marry John Franklin Douglas Sr. in Baldwin County, Alabama, on October 11, 1891. Ida would pass away on June 24, 1953 at her home in Gull Point, and was buried in Roberts Cemetery on Creighton Road, where John would join her in 1966. This is John and Ida at their home in Gull Point, where they lived most of their married life. John would support their family as a worker in a tar plant, probably the one close to their home on Scenic Highway. As old age approached, he took on odd jobs, but always as a worker. Now came the hard part. After 7 successful childbirths, Elzada would lose the next 4 children, ranging in age from 5 down to 1+ years old. Ella Eugenia Burgoyne was born in Pensacola in 1878 and would pass away prematurely from unknown causes on September 7, 1883, and was buried in St. Michael's Cemetery. Next came Mary Emma Burgoyne, would pass away prematurely on April 5, 1884, and was buried in the St. Michael's Cemetery. Her next 2 children were especially heartbreaking. William Marvin was born on August 23, 1883, and was quickly followed by Chester Ernest on May 30, 1885. Unfortunately, for the 2 young ones, they were born into a period when Pensacola had no formal sewage system. Springs maintained for the public or private wells were the only way to get water. Of course, without a public water system there could not be a sewage collection system. Outhouses were still in use, which could pollute the groundwater, or else dumping raw sewage into the local waterways such as the creeks, rivers, or bay. Not until 1904 was there a city water system, and in 1935 there was finally a sewage treatment plant. But none of this helped William and Chester Burgoyne, or so many others in the city. By 1886, Elzada had just become a widow with 2 young children under the age of 3 to raise. It is believed she was living at 616 East Garden Street or L 610 East Intendentia Street. That same year, and not far away, the lawyer William Fisher was buying the Dionisio Riace building at Palafox and East Intendentia Street. Apparently, there was a self-installed sewer line dumping raw sewage onto Intendentia Street. Even if they were living on Garden Street, she could still have been in the vicinity of the spill. But what does this have to do with William and Chester? Because the U.S. was experiencing limited outbreaks of cholera, which were finally connected to contaminated water supplies in 1883. Transmission was found to be by contact with fecal matter that has contaminated food or water through poor sanitation. An open sewer line being dumped on Intendentia Street could well have been the culprit for young William and Chester. As a result, both boys were buried 12 days apart in St. Michael's.